With a touch under a month until the March 2023 SAT, we're going to break down a really simple and effective study plan that you can follow to be able to improve your score by 100 points or more in less than a month. Now, I've carefully selected these topics and given you week by week checklists to follow based on topics that I know typically give many of the over 1,000 students I've worked with difficulty when they're initially seeing them on the SAT, and also topics that show up on every single SAT or almost every single SAT. So let's jump straight into it and help you improve. Now, the very first thing is if you have yet to take any practice SATs or you didn't take the PSAT or you haven't taken a real SAT, before we even get into week 1 and 2, you want to make sure you take a practice test. Now, the reason we want to do that is because in this first week, we want to focus on the half of the test, which is weaker for you. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to imagine that I'm weaker on the reading and writing and language half, but if you're weaker on the math, that means you can start with week 2 instead of week 1, which we will start with here. Now, for week 1, the first thing that we want to do is we really want to knock out the basic grammar rules. This is one of the quickest and easiest places to improve your score. And this means we need to learn our sentence structure, our clauses, our comma rules, our colons, dashes, semicolons, especially check out this semicolon list video I've done, your apostrophes, your pronouns, and your verbs. That's going to cover an enormous bulk of the grammar rules on the test, and none of these rules are super challenging to learn. The highlighted ones you see are stuff you can learn in my free trial. Don't need a credit card, really just there to help you out. Now, the other part we want to do is we want to start with reading, which for many students feels like the biggest challenge of the SAT. Now, for the reading, what we really want to focus on this first week is finding a strategy that works best for you, mastering how to deal with those paired evidence questions, and really starting to focus on what is making answer choices right versus wrong. Now, I do have a few reading videos and a reading playlist, which I'd recommend checking out, but the most important thing here, which is going to help you improve 5 times faster than most students do with reading, is instead of sitting down and doing entire reading sections from old SATs, go passage by passage and put 13 minutes on the clock. This is going to give you a really quick feedback loop, let you experiment, and let you really understand exactly where you went wrong on answer choices because you're going to remember your thought process really well. Now, in week number 2, we are going to really just focus on 5 math concepts, which may not seem like a lot, but this is going to keep you busy for the week, and mastering these is going to make an enormous difference in your score. Now, we're going to start off with percentages, especially percent increase and decrease. The SAT loves these increase-decrease questions. Sometimes you'll see 3 or 4 of them on a test, and it can make an enormous difference in your score. And otherwise, most students struggle on these. Even students scoring in the mid-700s consistently get these questions wrong. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we are comfortable with systems of equations. The SAT loves these, and a little bit of a pro tip, if you're looking at a word problem, there is a really good chance it's a system of equations. Now, the third concept, which covers a lot of different question types on the SAT, are quadratics. And this, once again, you can learn everything you need to know, all the formulas, all the tricks around quadratics for free in my free trial. So I'd check out that, and you get access to over 50 practice questions for those. Now, the last 2 concepts are going to be constants, which trip up a ton of students on the SAT with a lot of questions like these, and our test tricks of back solving and substitution. Now, both of those concepts, along with a few other concepts, I cover in my 30-minute crash course math video, so I would strongly recommend checking that out. It's going to get you way more comfortable with those. Now, ideally, after every single week, including that first week, we'd want to be sitting down and taking a full-length practice test. That may be too much of a time commitment for some of you. If you do have the time, you're really going to benefit. But after this second week especially, because we've already worked through learning some of the content for both halves of the test, you absolutely want to make sure you go and sit down and take a full-length practice test this weekend so you can start to gauge how much you're improving, and it's going to give you a little bit of feedback and see how comfortable you are applying what we've learned so far. Now, week number 3, we are going to cover everything across the SAT. And after you've taken that last practice test, you may have a little bit of a better idea of exactly where you need to focus and what rules you need to review from those first 2 weeks. But for week 3, for writing and language, we want to focus on our stylistic rules and all of those paragraph modification questions. This makes up about half of the writing and language section. So once again, it's an easy place to improve a lot once we get some strategies down. So which choice questions, adding, deleting information, most effectively combines logical placement, These are things that only take a handful of minutes to learn how to approach, but once you do, can significantly improve your score. Now for reading this week, we've really focused on the basics, which in a month, we're gonna be able to improve the most on. So all I want you doing this week is every single day, sit down and do 1 to 2 reading passages. So just put 13 minutes on the clock per passage, work through, review your mistakes. We're gonna keep using the same quick feedback loop to improve your score before we take our final practice test this weekend. Now for math, we're really just gonna focus on geometry and statistics, which pretty much no students are familiar with. For geometry, make sure you're really comfortable with all the different shapes formulas, your volume formulas, your angle rules, and all of your lines type questions, because those are super, super common on the SAT. Then as I said, this Saturday, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna take our final practice test. Now, make sure you're getting up early the exact same way you would on SAT test day and take the practice test in as similar of conditions as possible. It's really gonna make a big difference before you take the SAT next weekend. Now, before we jump into exactly what you need to do this really important final week before the SAT, if this video has helped you out, please like and subscribe, comment any questions you have, and share this with some of your friends. Helps get this out there and help more people out. Now, this last week before the SAT is not an ideal place to try to cram as much new stuff in as possible. You're gonna get overwhelmed, it's gonna be hard to retain the information. We really want to treat this as like a review week and a fine-tuning week. So make sure from all of the content that we have focused on in this kind of 1 month that we know is going to show up on SAT or has a super, super high probability of showing up on your test, that you have all of your rules and formulas memorized. Now, the other really important thing this week is after we've taken that last practice test, take note if there's any places you may benefit from going back and doing a few extra practice problems for the content that you already understand. The last final piece of advice, which makes a huge difference on test day, is from all of those individual reading passages, practice tests, or additional practice parts of tests that you've been taking, go back and look back at your mistakes and make sure you identified exactly where you went wrong, because the SAT is a very consistent test. The exact same patterns of right and wrong answers and presentation of questions shows up test to test. So by going back and reviewing those, you're giving yourself the opportunity of having a handful of moments on test day where you catch yourself before you make a mistake. Or you spot a pattern in the answer choices and you realize, oh, it's testing me on this concept, I have to apply this rule. This is really one of the biggest secrets to improving as quickly as possible. And if you don't go back and review those questions and redo those mistakes, it's really, really hard for you to get those questions right on test day. So review, revisit your old questions, redo anything you missed, and you're going to be putting yourself in the best position to be able to improve your score significantly over this last month. Now, my final kind of tip is put yourself on a good sleep schedule that last week. Being well rested makes an enormous difference on the SAT, where teeny tiny details make the difference between right versus wrong. So don't start staying up really late. The best thing you can do is start getting up at the exact same time you have to do for the SAT and make sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night. It's really going to help you out.